Tonight, we move slowly into a quieter corner of American history, a place not marked by monuments or celebrated victories, a place hidden behind locked doors, code names, and sealed documents. This is the story of the Cold War's secret experiments, projects carried out far from public view, decisions made in silence, choices shaped by fear, urgency, and uncertainty. So take a slow breath, let your body settle, and allow this story to unfold gently, like a dream drifting through time. The Cold War was not a single moment. It was a long season of tension, a quiet standoff between powerful nations, each watching the other closely. Missiles waited in silos, radars scanned the sky, and behind closed doors, leaders asked the same question again and again. What if the enemy discovers something first? Fear shaped everything. Fear of nuclear attack, fear of surprise, fear of losing control. And in that fear, experiments began. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, American scientists and military planners were given extraordinary freedom. They were told that normal rules could bend, that secrecy mattered more than transparency, that the survival of the nation depended on staying ahead. New laboratories were built in deserts, forests, and isolated towns. Some were hidden behind ordinary fences, others sat deep underground. Many workers did not know what they were truly building. They followed instructions, they trusted authority. And slowly, quietly, some of the most controversial experiments in American history took shape. One of the most well-known today began under a simple name, MK Ultra. The project started in the early 1950s, during a time when the U.S. government feared that enemies had discovered ways to control the human mind. Rumors circulated about brainwashing. Stories of captured soldiers returning home changed. Different, unfamiliar. Officials wondered if chemicals, hypnosis, or psychological pressure could break a person's will. And they wanted answers. MK Ultra was placed under the authority of the CIA. Its goal was vague, its methods unclear, and its boundaries almost non-existent. Researchers experimented with substances meant to alter perception, memory, and behavior. Some tests were done on volunteers, others were not. People were given drugs without being told. Patients in hospitals, prisoners, soldiers, ordinary citizens. LSD became one of the most common substances used. It was new, poorly understood, and powerful. Scientists observed quietly as subjects experienced confusion, fear, hallucinations, and emotional distress. Notes were taken, reports were written, files were classified. Most Americans knew nothing. Some participants later described confusion that followed them for years. Others never learned they had been part of an experiment at all. As decades passed, records were destroyed. Only fragments remained. When the program was finally exposed in the 1970s, even members of Congress were shocked. The full truth was never recovered. Too much had already been erased. But MK Ultra was only one chapter. Across the country, other experiments unfolded. In the deserts of Nevada and New Mexico, the U.S. government tested nuclear weapons. Explosions lit the sky. Shock waves rolled across empty land. Nearby towns were told little. Fallout drifted silently through the air. Families watched distant flashes without understanding what followed. Soldiers were sometimes placed close to test sites to observe the effects of nuclear blasts on the human body. They crouched in trenches, they shielded their eyes, they followed orders. Years later, many reported illnesses, cancers, strange symptoms. But at the time, data mattered more than safety. In other locations, biological experiments took place. The government studied how diseases might spread in cities, how wind carried particles, how quickly people might be exposed. In some cases, harmless substances were released to simulate dangerous ones. In other cases, the line between safe and unsafe was blurred. In San Francisco, clouds were released into the air to test dispersion. In the Midwest, experiments tracked how bacteria traveled through subway systems and public buildings. The public was never informed. Scientists recorded data quietly while ordinary people went about their days, walking, working, breathing. Cold War thinking justified it all. The belief was simple. If the enemy might do this, America had to understand it first. In secret military bases, other experiments focused on human endurance. How long could a pilot remain awake? How much stress could a soldier handle before breaking? How isolation affected the mind.
Volunteers were placed in dark rooms, in sealed chambers, in extreme cold or heat. Time blurred, sleep disappeared, thoughts slowed. The data was valuable. The cost was often ignored. Some projects aimed to create the perfect soldier, not stronger, but more obedient, more resistant to fear, less likely to question commands. The idea was not spoken openly, but it guided research. Could chemicals reduce anxiety? Could sound or light alter behavior? Could repetition reshape belief? Answers were searched for patiently, quietly. There were also experiments with technology. Early computer systems were tested in underground bunkers. Communication networks were hardened against attack. Artificial intelligence concepts began in small, forgotten rooms filled with humming machines. Radar systems scanned constantly. Satellites were launched. Surveillance expanded. The Cold War was not fought with armies alone. It was fought with information, with data, with control, and sometimes with secrecy that crossed ethical lines. Some scientists questioned what they were doing. Others believed the work was necessary. A few refused to continue, but the system moved forward. As the years passed, public trust in institutions remained high. Most Americans believed their government acted in their best interest. They watched television. They raised families. They trusted. And behind that trust, experiments continued. It was not until the late 1960s and 1970s that the silence began to crack. Journalists asked questions. Whistleblowers spoke carefully. Congress launched investigations. Committees uncovered fragments of truth, boxes of documents, testimonies filled with hesitation and regret. The public learned that consent had not always been given, that risks were hidden, that fear had justified too much. New laws were written, oversight increased, ethical standards were strengthened, but some damage could not be undone. The Cold War slowly came to an end. The Soviet Union collapsed. Missiles were dismantled, tensions eased, and many secret facilities were closed. Buildings were abandoned, labs emptied, equipment removed. Some sites were sealed permanently, others were repurposed. A few became museums. But the memory of those experiments lingered. They left behind questions that still echo softly today. How much secrecy is too much? What should never be tested, even in fear? And who decides? As we look back now, from a calmer distance, it is easy to judge. But at the time, the future felt uncertain, fragile. Leaders believed they were protecting the nation. Scientists believed they were advancing knowledge. Workers believed they were following orders. History is rarely simple. The Cold War experiments remind us that progress can move too fast, that fear can blur judgment, that silence can hide harm. But they also remind us of the importance of reflection, of learning, of choosing transparency over secrecy. Tonight, as we let this story fade gently into the background, we remember that history is not only about what happened, but about what we choose to carry forward. The experiments have ended, the files have aged, the rooms have grown quiet, and now they rest where they belong, in the past. Let your thoughts slow, let the tension dissolve. The world outside is calm, and as the echoes of this hidden history soften, you drift peacefully onward, into rest, into quiet, into sleep,